Year 5 teacher Simon Botten came up with an ambitious approach to teaching the subject of Henry VIII's wives by getting his class to research, script and film their own Tudor-style newsreels in just one lesson.
Anne weeping with her father and he the castle which Henry gave her.
But just how effective was this method of teaching history? In this programme, Simon reflects on how he thought it went, as do two history experts. Dr. Penelope Harnett is Principal Lecturer in Primary Education at the University of the West of England. And Dr. Michael Riley is a Senior Lecturer in History at Bath Spa University College. So what will our experts be looking for in Simon's lesson?
History is about inquiry and communication. I hope that I'm going to see children who've had their curiosity fired, really. It should be fun, so I hope I see children who are enjoying the lesson and enjoying finding out about history. But it should also be hard, and I hope I see children who are having their minds stretched and are thinking hard about the complexity, really, of history.
As it's a history lesson, I'm hoping that I'm going to see lots of inquiries. I'm hoping that I'll see Simon asking some questions, but also encouraging children to ask questions and to find answers to them. I'm hoping that he'll have thought of ways in which he can employ a range of sources so the children are not just being told things but have the opportunity to look up things as well. And I'm hoping I'll hear quite a lot of talk, children listening to each other, because I think that's how a good way of how children learn.
Your news broadcast is going to be on the day after whatever happened to that wife has happened. So if Anne Boleyn's had her head chopped off, it's on the 19th of May, you're on the 20th of May, telling the nation. We're going to have various roles. We're going to have a director. That director is the person who's in charge of making sure everybody in your team is doing their job.
It's interesting with teaching, isn't it? Because the explanation is really clear here. And maybe what we want to see, though, is a more pupil participation at this point, really,
yes,
to check their understanding, to elicit some examples of what they're meant to be doing from them.
I was going through my attic the other day, and I just happened to find a Tudor newsreel. What are the chances of that? It's a bit grainy. It's not very long. It must have been a relative of mine, I think, because there are certain similarities. On the Battle of Bosworth. This will give you an idea as to the sort of tone you need to do when you're doing your news broadcast. So, here is a Tudor newsreel. I hope it's in the right place.
Today, on the 21st of August, 1485, grave things are happening in Bosworth Field.
It's interesting that a lot of the time when children sometimes struggle with a task, it's because they can't visualise what a good one looks like, isn't it? And here Simon is presenting them with a model of the kind of thing that they should be presenting in literally 1 minute. And it's extraordinary the trouble he's taken to do that, to kind of dress up in silly costume and put makeup on and be filmed. But that's going to really help the children see what kind of thing they themselves should be producing.
Yes, so they actually now they've got a structure for their work, and they've also got some understanding of the end product and where they're going to as well. So those are two key things which have helped structure that lesson.
Yes.
I bid thee good night.
So that gives us the idea of what we're aiming for. Yours isn't going to be as polished as that, but it has to have that kind of amount of information. So the first job we've got is research. Every single person in the class should be involved in this. There's enough sheets here for one person to have a sheet each. The other piece of paper you have on your desk is 4 web addresses called Easy, Medium, Hard, and that's to do with the reading on
the actual research part of it. The children did quite well with what they had. The problem we have, and often happens, is that children automatically assume books bad, internet good. And a lot of the children wasted quite a bit of time trying to find resources on the internet when there was equally good resources sat in front of them in a book, but because it's on the computer, therefore it must be better. And we try and do a lot of work on breaking down that, because obviously the written resources in many respects are going to be better than the ones they can find on the internet in that short period of time.
I was pleased that the way they're actually using books and that fact sheet, and he's also giving them some internet resources here. And the web addresses, he's actually told them which are easy, medium and hard as well.
Yes.
I think that's really important, because you spend a long time on a very hard website.
Yes. This is a very, very useful approach to inclusivity in the classroom, isn't it? That all the children are doing exactly the same thing.
Yeah.
They're all researching, they're all going to do their news broadcasts.
Yeah.
They're collaborating in small groups.
There's much background information about where the Queen came from, what she liked. Who was she? How did Henry meet her?
The children were in mixed ability groups, really because if you try this, it was quite an adventurous activity, something they'd never done before. They'd not used their cameras before, they'd not been asked to work in that way before. And if you set them into ability groups, what you'd have then is you'd have half of them whizzing ahead and doing fantastically imaginative work in the first 5 minutes, and some of the less able children in some respects would find it very difficult to start. Now if you put them in mixed ability groups, it allows all the children actually to have their say.
OK, could you now put your pencils down? The owner of your Tudor television station, the Earl of Warwick, has come in a right strop and told you that you've got to stop researching now and start writing the script, because you've got to go on air in about half an hour's time, which means you have to have a script ready in 15 minutes' time.
It's actually got the children working now, but as the clock ticks away, and we'll be interested to see if they're getting more panicky, if they've been able to do so much. It's obviously a good motivator to start them off and to get them keen. Whether they're going to get worried towards the end if they're not completing it, we should have to wait and see, I think.
And I think we need that variety in learning, don't we?
Yeah.
Sometimes we need to get children working to strict time pressures like this. Because it's enjoyable, because there is that kind of need to work to time schedules sometimes.
In a moment, I'm going to hand out 2 very high-tech items. 1, a pen. 2, a very large piece of paper. It's the next best thing to auto cue. You've got to think, how am I going to make this sound interesting for the Tudor public? Then I'm going to need to say what's happened in a bit more detail. Then I've got to say why it's happened. Then I've got to give a bit of background information about the Queen. What do we know about her? Then what do we think Henry's going to do next? OK, straight down to work then.
It's an interesting transition point in the lesson, isn't it, this? Between the children working as researchers and now communicating their findings. And again, Simon explains the task really, really clearly.
Well, what it brings out as well, isn't it, that you use the tools which are appropriate for the task.
Yeah.
And so, yes, there's some ICT there in the lesson, but if you're wanting the auto cue, he's actually decided that pen and paper's, what's going to be necessary there. And so all the time it's modelling to the children that you make choices about the sorts of tools which you're wanting to use for your learning, isn't it? And this is what's appropriate for this task.
She died because she got ill of having the baby and nothing could help her. Yeah, but what did she get? No, because they didn't have medicine nurses.
Time to actually start recording our news broadcasts. Now, let me explain a few things about the video cameras. Now, on the front of these cameras is a very small microphone. Now, if the camera person starts talking, then you hear this. Oh, how'd you do this? I need to move. Excuse me. And you don't hear anything else. If you're the camera operator or anyone else stood around, is that you're absolutely silent.
Lovely use of humour to explain the task. And it's really reinforcing the technical points about using. And these are fantastic, aren't they? The digital video camera, the cheap digital video cameras that the children can use in groups.
You group, this group, you just go outside that door there, please. Could this group here, would you like to just work outside that door?
It's almost as if, though, because their use of the technology is new, because this is the first time they've used them, the technology dominates this part of the lesson. The history's completely gone out of the window at this point. Ordinarily, Simon would be reminding them at this point about the good things that they should be including in terms of historical knowledge. Here, the focus is on the technology.
Today I have terrible news to tell you. Our Queen has died just after giving birth to Edward. She died because she got very ill of having the baby.
I just thought that was an interesting clip because the child was reading it out, and as she was reading it out she'd read that little bit further ahead and she realised that it wasn't making sense, that she died of because having a baby or something like that. But she wasn't quick enough to think about how to change what it should be. So I think it'd be good that you have an opportunity to redraft it, to go back over it.
Anne of Cleves divorced only 24 hours ago. Anne is weeping with her father in Hever Castle, which Henry gave her. The reason why this marriage has ended is because Henry found the picture more beautiful than Anne in reality.
We tried to get an awful lot done in that session, and had we actually showed the children how to use the cameras in a slightly less time-restricted setting, maybe 10 minutes at the end of the day for them to actually just go off and play using the cameras and working out how they best work, then that would take some of the pressure off and take those areas that are so prone to going wrong out of the equation straight away.
That's the disadvantage of a lesson like this, isn't it? Where everything's compressed into an hour and a quarter, and where children have to come up with a finished product in that time.
Yes.
That often children like the finished product to be polished, and so a longer time scale has advantages.
Here we go. Absolute quiet now for the first piece of news.
Yesterday, Catherine Howard, daughter of Lord Edmund Howard, was beheaded by her husband, King Henry VIII.
At the end of the lesson, the children got to watch their films, which were very powerful and allowed them to share each other's work and hopefully pick up some of the information about the other wives as well. But what we didn't have time to do was to actually sort of take that apart as part of the plenary and think about what we need to learn next, what gaps are there in the information, how much of the information could be trusted. And all these sorts of questions you'd like to round off the lesson, but as I say, trying to get it all done in 1 hour was a little bit frantic anyway, and probably if I were to do it again, I would possibly give it maybe only 10 more minutes, maybe after a break or after the children had a chance to go away and kind of run around a bit and get the excitement of the activity out of their heads first, and then come back and think about it a bit more critically, just so that the actual history skills and history information that they've picked up is what lingers with them rather than something else.
It must be a record. Queen gone. Anne of Cleves divorced only 24 hours ago.
This is really interesting, isn't it? Because the children have been engaged and motivated throughout this lesson, but it's at the end when they're watching each other, or I guess more significantly when they're watching themselves, that they're really kind of come to life and are just so animated and clearly enjoying this so much.
Do you think you like more, Catherine or Anne? What do you think?
I think Henry lost his temper at the end there. Give him a clap, that's brilliant.
I thought it was a very exciting lesson. The children were really enthusiastic. You could see them researching different pieces of information, finding out as much as they could about the different queens.
It was so good to see the way he'd integrated ICT into the lesson, and particularly good to see how excited the children were at the end when they were doing their presentations and watching them. I think the challenge now for all of us as teachers is to make sure that that excitement is just as much about the history as it is about the ICT.
A very good quote someone once told me, a little analogy if you like. A child stops you in the street. Many years have passed since you taught this child. Sir, do you remember me? It's like, yeah, of course I do. Do you remember that lesson, that fabulous lesson you did, the one with the worksheet? And that kind of sums it up really. There's absolutely no point teaching this if the children aren't going to remember it. And I think that's really what we're trying to get across here. The technology's great, it helps fulfil that aim, but children will remember context more than content. And if you can provide an exciting context, then they're going to remember the content as well. So it is more effort, but then I think you've got to ask yourself, if you do a lesson and the children don't remember it a day later, then you may as well not bother in the first place.